Hollywood woke up to what insiders are already calling the most ruthless legacy move in entertainment history, and the fallout is shaking Beverly Hills to its core. Rob Reiner, the director, the activist, the moral voice of a generation, the man with a $250 million empire. And according to explosive leaks, his own kids are getting cut out completely. Not a reduced inheritance, not a trust fund delay, not a we'll talk later clause. Nothing. Sources say the decision was deliberate, airtight, and planned years in advance. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just break hearts, it detonated the entire family. Private phone calls allegedly turned into screaming matches. One child reportedly collapsed in tears. Another is said to have thrown a phone across the room after hearing the words. This was always the plan. Lawyers were contacted. Friends were dragged into the mess. And Hollywood elites who once praised Reiner's values are now quietly asking the same question. What kind of father leaves his entire fortune to the world and nothing to his children? But here's where it gets darker. This wasn't just about charity. It wasn't just about principles. Insiders claim this was about judgment, disappointment, and a belief that his kids failed some invisible test. And the most chilling part? Rob Reiner reportedly knew this would hurt them, and did it anyway. Because once you hear what was allegedly said behind closed doors, once you hear why he believed this was necessary, you'll realize this isn't a will, it's a verdict. And the next revelation? It's even worse. The moment the sealed documents were finally whispered about inside a Beverly Hills law office, everything changed. Not publicly, not yet. But inside that room, the truth landed like a body blow. According to an insider who claims they saw the paperwork firsthand, there was no ambiguity, no soft language, no loopholes. Rob Reiner's estate plan was brutally clear. His children were not beneficiaries. They weren't secondary recipients. They weren't even listed as symbolic heirs. They were excluded. When word reached the family, it didn't come with a warning or a sit-down. It came like a leak always does, sideways, incomplete, and devastating. A phone call from someone who assumed they already knew. A sentence that started with, "I didn't think this was a secret," and ended with stunned silence on the other end of the line. One insider claims one of Rob's children went completely still after hearing it, repeating, no, that can't be right," under their breath like a prayer that refused to work. Another reportedly demanded to see the documents immediately, convinced there had to be a mistake. There wasn't. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't paperwork gone wrong. This was intentional. And once that realization settled in, the emotional temperature inside the family spiked instantly. Shock turned into confusion. Confusion curdled into anger. And anger exploded into a question nobody could answer without breaking something permanently. Why? According to sources close to Rob Reiner, this decision didn't come from a sudden change of heart or a deathbed impulse. It was philosophical, calculated, years in the making. Rob allegedly believed that leaving massive wealth to his children would do more harm than good, that it would weaken them. That struggle builds character, and comfort destroys it. He didn't see it as abandonment, one longtime associate claimed. He saw it as tough love on a global scale. But tough love feels very different when you're the one being cut out. As the news spread quietly through inner Hollywood circles, reactions were immediate and polarized. Some longtime friends defended Rob fiercely, saying he'd been vocal for decades about not believing in generational handouts. Others were visibly disturbed, questioning how a man so vocal about compassion could make a choice that felt emotionally brutal. Behind closed doors, the family wasn't debating philosophy. They were unraveling. According to an alleged leaked text exchange between siblings, one wrote, "So charity gets everything and we get a life lesson." Another responded with just 3 words, "I feel erased." That word, erased, began to define everything. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about meaning. About whether they mattered enough to be included in the story of a man who spent his career telling stories about humanity, justice, and empathy. To be written out of his final chapter felt like a public rejection stamped in legal ink. Things escalated quickly. One source claims a private confrontation took place, not screaming, not theatrical, but cold and devastating. A child allegedly asked Rob directly if this was punishment. His response, according to the source, was calm and chilling. "It's preparation." That answer shattered whatever hope was left that this could be talked through. From there, the walls went up. Calls went unanswered. Conversations turned transactional. Lawyers' names started being dropped into sentences that once carried warmth. And suddenly, the family dynamic wasn't about grief or loss anymore. It was about survival. Meanwhile, the outside world started catching on. A cryptic post from a well-known Hollywood insider hit social media late one night. Not every will is an act of love. Within hours, speculation exploded. Fans started connecting dots. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips of Rob Reiner talking about independence and responsibility were reposted with new, darker captions. One viral tweet read, "Imagine being raised by a man worth $250 million only to be told charity deserves you more than your kids do." Another shot back, "Inheritance isn't a right. It's a privilege." The internet split clean in half. But while strangers argued philosophy, the family was dealing with something far more personal, humiliation. Because in Hollywood, money is power, and being publicly cut out of that power sends a message no PR team can soften. According to insiders, one of Rob's children reportedly said, "This feels like being disowned without the decency of saying the word." And then came the alleged recording. Unverified but spreading fast. A tense family call. Voices raised, one person asking, "So this is it?" Another responding, "You were never supposed to rely on it." If real, it confirms what many feared: this wasn't an accident. It was a lesson delivered with zero cushioning. That's when things turned volatile. Sources claim legal consultations began almost immediately, not necessarily to contest the will, but to understand if there was anything left to hold onto. The answer was grim. The structure was designed to withstand challenges. Charitable trusts layered on top of trusts. Assets already earmarked. Control transferred long before death. Rob Reiner hadn't just made a decision, he fortified it. And according to one insider, he anticipated this exact reaction. He allegedly told a friend years ago, "They'll be angry, that's part of it." That statement alone reframed everything. Because it suggests Rob accepted, even expected, emotional fallout as collateral damage. That whatever this was meant to teach, pain was part of the curriculum. The family didn't see it as a lesson, they saw it as a verdict. By the end of that first week, relationships were already fraying beyond repair. Siblings stopped coordinating responses. Friends began choosing sides. And Hollywood, always hungry for a morality play, lined in closer. But the most unsettling detail hadn't even surfaced yet. Because according to multiple insiders, this decision wasn't just about money or ideology. It was about disappointment. And once the reason for that disappointment fully comes out, the fallout won't just be emotional. It will be explosive. By the time the second wave of leaks started circulating, the story had already mutated into something far darker than an inheritance dispute. What people thought was a philosophical decision began to look, from the inside, like a long-simmering family reckoning that had been quietly building for years. According to multiple so-called insiders, Rob Reiner didn't wake up one day and decide to cut his children out. This wasn't impulsive. It was progressive. A slow tightening of emotional and financial distance that few people noticed until it was too late. The first red flag, sources say, was the shift in how Rob talked about his kids in private. Publicly, he remained the proud father. Privately, friends claim his tone changed. Conversations allegedly drifted toward frustration, disappointment, a belief that his children hadn't stood on their own the way he expected them to. One longtime acquaintance claims Rob once said, "They confuse access with achievement." At the time, it sounded like an abstract comment about Hollywood culture. Now, insiders believe it was personal. That mindset, if true, explains what happened next. Behind closed doors, Rob reportedly began documenting everything. Not legally, emotionally. Who showed initiative? Who didn't? Who leaned on his name? Who avoided struggle? These weren't notes meant for lawyers. They were judgments meant for himself. And once those judgments hardened, so did the estate plan. Family members noticed the change too, even if they didn't understand it. Invitations felt colder. Conversations shorter. Advice turned into lectures. Support turned conditional. One alleged leaked text from a family friend reads, "It felt like he was evaluating them instead of loving them." Then came the confrontation nobody expected. According to a source who claims knowledge of a private meeting, one of Rob's children asked him directly if the inheritance was still the plan. The response, allegedly, wasn't reassurance. It was deflection. "You don't need it," Rob reportedly said. That's the point. That answer shattered any illusion of safety. Because from that moment on, the kids weren't wondering if something was wrong. They were wondering how bad it already was. As rumors spread internally, emotions boiled over. One insider claims a sibling confrontation turned ugly fast. Accusations of favoritism, resentment, and emotional neglect flying across the room. One child allegedly shouted, "You care more about being right than being our father." Rob didn't yell back, he reportedly just listened. And that silence is what haunts them now. Because according to people close to him, Rob interpreted the anger not as pain, but as proof. Proof in his mind that his children were too attached to security, too reactive, too dependent, which meant to him the decision was justified. When lawyers finalized the charitable trust structure, it wasn't framed as punishment. It was framed as purpose. Assets locked in, beneficiaries named, oversight assigned. Every safeguard put in place to ensure the money could never circle back to the family. When the kids finally understood the full scope of it, sources say the reaction was explosive. One reportedly accused Rob of choosing strangers over blood. Another allegedly broke down, sobbing that they felt replaced by ideals. These weren't greedy tantrums. These were identity fractures. Because when your parent tells the world you don't need them anymore, it hits differently than any public criticism ever could. The outside world, meanwhile, was watching the implosion in real time. Hashtags trended. Opinion pieces flooded timelines. Celebrities weighed in without naming names. One viral clip showed a famous actor saying, "Charity is noble, abandonment isn't." Another responded, "Raising independent adults means trusting them to survive disappointment." The debate turned vicious. But inside the family, the real damage wasn't happening online. It was happening in the quiet spaces. Missed calls, unreturned messages, holidays discussed in past tense. The realization that no matter how this played out publicly, something sacred was already gone. Then came another leak, this one changing the tone entirely. According to an insider with alleged access to estate planning conversations, Rob didn't believe his children would be left with nothing. He believed they'd be left with pressure. Pressure to define themselves without his shadow. Pressure to fail or succeed on their own terms. He thought money would dilute their urgency, the source claimed. He wanted them to feel the weight of life. But here's the part nobody can ignore. Pressure is one thing, grief is another. And this decision landed not during stability, but during loss. That timing is what turned disappointment into devastation. According to multiple sources, at least one child begged for reconsideration, not for the money, but for acknowledgement. Something symbolic, something that said, "You still matter to me." The answer allegedly was no. That refusal is what broke the family, because it reframed everything that came before, every smile, every reassurance, every "I'm proud of you." Suddenly, those moments felt conditional, approval granted only if expectations were met. And expectations, once unmet, erased everything else. By this point, legal teams weren't just discussing options. They were discussing optics, how this would look if challenged, how public sympathy might shift, how quickly charity could turn into controversy. One lawyer reportedly warned, "If this becomes about emotional cruelty instead of philosophy, the narrative flips." That warning didn't change the plan. Rob Reiner stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, no attempts to soften the blow. And that silence allowed something dangerous to grow: resentment. Not quiet resentment, not passive sadness, active fury. According to a source close to the family, one child allegedly said, "If he wanted us to stand on our own, fine, but he didn't have to knock us down first." That line circulated privately before leaking publicly. When it did, the internet exploded all over again, because now the story wasn't about inheritance. It was about power. Who gets to decide what love looks like? Who gets to define success? And whether teaching a lesson is worth destroying trust. And just when it seemed like everything had already come out, another detail surfaced. One that suggests this decision may not have been unanimous, even inside Rob Reiner's own household. Because according to whispers growing louder by the day, someone very close to Rob didn't agree with this move at all. And if that disagreement becomes public, this story won't just fracture a family. It will detonate a legacy. By the time the final fracture surfaced, the story crossed a line no one could walk back from. Because the newest leak didn't come from a blogger chasing clicks or a distant industry observer. It came from inside the house. And once that detail slipped out, everything people thought they understood about this decision collapsed. According to multiple insiders, Rob Reiner was not alone in this choice, but he also wasn't fully supported. The name whispered behind closed doors was the one no one expected to hear attached to doubt: his spouse. Sources claim that in the months leading up to the finalization of the estate plan, there were heated, private disagreements that never reached the public. Arguments that weren't about numbers but about timing. about compassion, about whether teaching a lesson should ever come at the cost of emotional devastation. One insider alleges that during a late-night conversation, Rob was warned, "They will never forgive you for this." His response, reportedly calm and unwavering, was, "They don't need forgiveness. They need independence." That line has now become the most quoted sentence in Hollywood backchannels, because if true, it reveals something chilling. Rob Reiner wasn't just prepared to be misunderstood. He was prepared to be hated. And that realization sent the family into a free fall. According to a source close to the children, the moment they learned there had been internal disagreement, that this wasn't a united parental front, the anger shifted. It stopped being abstract. It stopped being philosophical. It became personal. One child allegedly said, "So this could have gone differently." That sentence destroyed any remaining sense of closure. Because now the pain wasn't just about what was done, it was about what didn't have to be done. As the story intensified, more alleged recordings began circulating privately. Not released publicly yet, but referenced by people who claim to have heard them. Clips of raised voices, long pauses, one moment where Rob allegedly says, "I can't soften this without undermining it." Another voice responds, "Or without breaking them." That exchange, if real, reframes everything. It suggests this wasn't a clean moral stand. It was a battle between ideology and empathy, and ideology won. Hollywood reacted instantly. Longtime allies started distancing themselves quietly, not publicly condemning Rob, but avoiding association. Invitations dried up. Conversations shifted tone. One anonymous producer reportedly said, "I respect the charity. I don't respect the collateral damage." Social media turned ruthless. Viral threads dissected Rob's past interviews line by line, searching for signs of emotional rigidity. Old quotes once praised as principled were now reframed as cold. TikToks popped up comparing him to other wealthy figures who cut off their kids, labeling it legacy control disguised as virtue. Meanwhile, the charitable foundations at the center of the storm tried to stay silent, but even that silence drew fire. People began asking uncomfortable questions. Did these organizations know they were inheriting a fortune built on family exclusion? Would they accept it if the children publicly challenged the narrative? Was charity still noble if it came at this cost? The pressure mounted fast. According to insiders, one foundation board member allegedly asked, "What happens if this turns into a public morality trial?" Another reportedly responded, "Then we stand on the mission." But the mission doesn't erase the pain. Behind the scenes, the children reportedly reached a breaking point. Not legally, emotionally. One source claims a sibling meeting ended with someone walking out, saying, "I'm done trying to be understood by someone who already judged me." That was the moment the family stopped trying to reconcile. From that point on, the conversations weren't about changing Rob's mind. They were about reclaiming their own identities. Publicly, they stayed mostly silent, but insiders say that silence was strategic. Let the story grow. Let the contradictions surface. Let people ask why a man so committed to justice couldn't extend grace to his own blood. And it worked. The narrative began to shift. What started as principled generosity slowly morphed into emotional severity. Articles appeared questioning whether legacy should be measured by ideals alone or by relationships sustained. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories of parents who chose principle over presence. Rob Reiner remained silent through all of it. No clarification, no reassurance, no attempt to bridge the gap. That silence, once seen as dignified, now felt defiant. Then came the final alleged revelation, the one insiders say could change everything if it ever becomes public. According to a source claiming direct knowledge, Rob may have left behind a private letter, not addressed to the public, not addressed to charity, addressed to his children. The contents haven't been confirmed, but the rumor alone has set off a frenzy. Some say it explains everything. Others say it doubles down on the philosophy. A few claim it includes a line that reads, "I trust you'll understand this when you no longer need me." If that letter exists, it may be the last word in a conversation that never found peace. Because what's undeniable now is this. Rob Reiner's legacy will no longer be discussed without this decision attached to it. Every film, every speech, every cause, all of it now lives alongside one haunting question. Can a man be celebrated for uplifting the world while emotionally devastating his own family? There's no court ruling that can answer that. No trust structure that